And so today we're going to be chatting with Jeff Smith, who's the CEO of DC Bank, and we're going to have a lot of fun. So maybe, Jeff, I'll call you up and let's get into it. Give it up for Jeff, everyone.
My lecture is shorter.
I only recently sat up here for the first time, maybe a couple of months ago, after having hosted this for a couple of years, sorry. And my only takeaway was like, holy shit, I can't believe I made everyone sit on these uncomfortable chairs.
My legs are at least long.
So maybe enough about me. Why don't I hand it over to you to introduce yourself and not as broadly. Maybe just give me a quick sentence, and then I'll poke and prod, and we can unveil some of your early beginnings.
Sure. My name is Jeff Smith. I'm the CEO of Digital Commerce Group. We're a group of three companies, Digital Commerce Bank, of course, being the central one, a Schedule I Canadian bank, as well as Patino Payments and Digital Commerce Payments.
And so we're going to spend, and for everyone, just so you can follow along on the journey, we're going to spend some time. The whole title of this talk is From Founder to CEO, How Your Leadership Should Change Over Time. And so we're going to spend some time about that, but we want to focus to start on some of Jeff's early beginnings and specifically on direct cash and what that story was like. And then we'll spend some time talking about what skills it takes to be an entrepreneur and how those should change. And then spend some time talking about what's going on now at Digital Commerce Bank and what does that look like. So I want to start early and we'll bring the audience along with us on the journey. You're 18 years old. You're living in Victoria. Tell me about what you're doing when you're 18. What does that look like?
I was doing what every other 18-year-old wants. Trying to get beer. No. When I was going to high school, I wasn't that good of a student. I was working at a gas station. I was refereeing hockey. I was working at the local, the sort of Kmart. I had probably 2 or 3 full-time jobs, and I was interested in making money is what I was interested in back then. But I was doing what every other 18-year-old was doing at the time. I was trying to figure a way to get off sales when I wasn't 19 yet.
Yeah.
And at 18 years old, I started at a gas station, closing the gas station. One of my buddies was the assistant manager there, and he said to me, well, why don't you work for me on the weekends and close the gas station? So I said, sure. And that's how I started at the gas station.
You started at the gas station, and then what's the journey from 18-year-old you starting at a gas station to then you turned 21 and you discovered winters for the first time, moving to Edmonton and realizing what the hell is a winter coat?
Well, so I was working at Kmart managing their furniture department while going to school, and I was working at this gas station, closing the gas station on the weekends. And then I graduated high school, and the guys who were running the gas station said to me, well, why don't you run one of your own? I said, okay, how much does that pay? And at the time, this was 30 years ago, they said, well, this pays X. And I said, well, that's a lot of money. Like, oh my God. So I started running one gas station. And then that didn't seem too difficult. You work a lot of hours, you count a lot of things and make sure that nothing goes missing. And that conveniently, the more hours you work, the less thing that goes missing because you're always there. So I ran 10, and then they came to me and said, well, Jeff, we have a job, and it's in Edmonton, to run Western Canada from Thunder Bay to Vancouver.
Yeah.
And of course, they didn't tell me how far Thunder Bay was, and they gave me a company car, and I thought I was in heaven because I had to drive to Thunder Bay from Edmonton, and I had to drive to Vancouver. But I moved to Edmonton, and I didn't know that you had plugged-in cars. I didn't know that was a thing. I lived in Victoria, BC, and I ran gas stations from Thunder Bay all the way to Vancouver.
So you must know this intimately, but when you're driving past Kenora, which is as far west as you can go in Ontario, there's a big sign that says fill up our gas right now because there's no stops for 5 hours until that.
There's a lot of those signs in Western Canada too.
Yeah, this is the best. Yeah.
High level, Rainbow Lake. They're all over.
And so now you're running these gas stations, and this is still early Jeff, but you
I was 22, 23 years old, living out of Edmonton. we had, and I was, you know, in the convenience store business and the gas business, you know, it's fairly regimented. You got to count your inventory, you got to manage your inventory, but you learn to balance your books to save quite quickly. And I ran Western Canada, and we bought the business I was with. We bought the Esso when Esso and Texaco, when Texaco was divested to pay for the Pennzoil lawsuit that they had in the U.S. that lost. Texaco sold their Canadian assets to Esso, and then there remained about 75 service stations that Esso had to sell due to competition reasons, and we bought them.
Okay.
And we bought them and we bought them right across Canada, right to Thunder Bay. And I thought it was a great promotion. I didn't realize Edmonton was so cold. And I ended up running and converted them. We bought them all from Esso, or we bought them all from Texaco, and we bought them, put in operators, and ran them. And I did that for a few years until they asked me to come back and run it on Vancouver Island.
Okay. So you move back to Vancouver Island, and then Shell comes in, the big Shell comes in and acquires you as well. And
yeah, Shell acquired us because we didn't pay for our gas. We didn't pay them $400 million. So the guys I worked with, and Shell said, well, rather than collect on the $400 million, we're going to buy the business. So they bought the business, and I started working for Shell. And I was 25 at the time with a 3-year-old. And Shell said to me, we don't have a job for you here, Jeff, on Vancouver Island. We have a job in Calgary. I had a 3-year-old. And I said, well, I guess I'm moving to Calgary. I'd love to move to Calgary.
Yeah, cool. Let's call it 1993. Okay. And how's it been? I mean, our crowd is, last week our conversation was on the future of the Calgary tech ecosystem. What's it been like living and working here? We'll get back to your story a little bit, but what's the take on Calgary? Are you long Calgary? Is everyone's
listen, I think Calgary is a wonderful place to raise your kids. I think Calgary is a wonderful place. You can still buy houses here for a reasonable dollar. You know, the traffic occasionally is bad, but generally when you, versus Toronto or Vancouver, this is a great place to live.
Yeah.
It's a great place to have a business. It's a business first community. So I think it's a great place.
Cool. So now you're working at Shell. You're 27. You're almost no, not yet.
I'm
around 27, and so I'm leading you a little bit, but maybe tell me now, because you're working as an executive at Shell.
Sure. Bit of a stretch. Like, listen, Shell's a business of 4,000 employees. Yeah. So when you're an executive, like I was, you know, the rung was here, and I was. Like I ran 300 service stations for Shell, which is, you know, 3 rungs up the executive ladder, and there's 40 above you.
Okay.
But listen, I worked for a great guy. He'd been at Shell for 35 years. I thought he was old as the hills at the time. He was 53. I was 27.
Okay.
And I passed 53 a while ago. So. Listen, he was a great guy. Had a ton of experience, and he really let me run my business.
Yeah.
And working for a big company like Shell is an opportunity for you to see what well-run businesses are. They have policies, procedures. They have all kinds of resources that you can access.
Yeah.
And you know, I was lucky enough at the time to do a number of transactions working for, and we ran a business out here, and ran Canadian Turbo Western Canada, and I was lucky enough to do the propane deal with Superior Propane on service stations so when you fill up your propane tank, I did that deal originally. Put subways in gas stations. I was the first one to do that. We did a diesel additive program, and then I had these ATMs in my convenience stores. I ran this big convenience store network on Vancouver Island that we talked about a few minutes ago, Payless Gas. And this was a very big convenience store operator, and we had ATMs. And what happened was 7-Eleven did a deal, and I lost my ATMs, and they walked across the street.
Right.
And I lost 10% of my sales. And in the fuel business, it's like any business. You have to manage your expenses. There was nothing left to, you know, we couldn't cut the hours. We couldn't do anything, but 10% of my sales walked across the street. I was just, you know, we lost 30 ATMs overnight almost.
Yeah.
And I was in the U.S. at a trade show in Chicago called NACS, National Association of Convenience Stores. And there's these guys selling ATMs. I said, I'll buy a couple of those.
Yeah.
So I took everybody's business cards at the time. And this is in 1996, you know, 30 years ago now. And I took all their business cards. I went back to Calgary, and I phoned NCR. I phoned Diebold. I phoned all Wincourt, Nixdorf, and they all said, there's nothing we you know, this is owned by the banks. You can't do this. Yeah. Then I phoned this little company out of Mississippi called Triton, and they said, if you want to do this, come on down and see us. And I flew down to Mississippi, and they said, we're happy to give you a couple ATMs. We don't know if you can do it or not. And what I did was we put a point-of-sale device, a POS device, the same ones you have in Safeway, and I made the POS device talk to the ATM, and then we sent it up to the network, and we charged $1. Okay. And we didn't ask. Like, you have to appreciate when Shell Canada wants to do Shell's a big business.
Yeah.
They're as big as Royal Bank. So Shell didn't care. Like these guys got they've got a lot of balls.
Do you see like 10% walk across the street and they're not really blinking? They're going, you know where?
Well, the Shell guy said, hey, if you think you can do it, give it a shot. Yeah. And we sent the transaction up, and we started making $1 a transaction. And that dollar turned into thousands of dollars a month per location. Over 38, I'm making more money on ATMs than I am in some of these small gas stations in rural Alberta, rural BC.
Really keeping the lights open at these.
Yeah. And these gas stations, if you remember, not that everybody here would remember, in 1997, there was gas wars. You know, I was keeping service stations open just to pay part of the lease, because if I closed them down, I had to pay the whole lease, right? Because I was making enough money to pay part of the lease. So, and I said to Shell at the time, I said, listen, you know, guys, this is something we should do. I was 27, 28 years old. This is something we should do. He's selling it to Esso, Petrocan, 7-Eleven. This is manna from heaven.
Yeah.
I went into my boss, and he looked at me and he said, Jeff, go back to your office. We're in the gas business. We've been in the gas business 150 years. That's not our core business. It's good to be a little entrepreneur, but that's not what we do around here. So I typed up my resignation, and I started this business called Direct Cash Payments.
Yeah. Okay.
In 1997.
That's amazing. I love that. Go back to your office. Cool. I'll go back to my office and sign my resignation letter. Yeah, that's great. This seems like a great idea. Okay, cool. So sign your resignation letter, and you say, cool, we're going to start Direct Cash. You have a partner at the time. And how much startup capital did you have?
Not a lot. We had we started with $45,000, and we put in another $250,000. So we had $295,000. Okay. And I took a pay cut from half, and my partner didn't get paid, and we moved on to 7th Avenue here into one of these little business centers. This is before WeWork.
Yeah. Okay.
WeWork's really pretty now, I got to tell you. WeWork's really nice compared to where I worked, and we worked across the desk from each other, and we started putting ATMs in. I put my first ATM in. Anybody who's been in Halifax, in a place called the Lower Deck. That was my first ATM. My second ATM was the Red Lion Inn in Victoria. And if you've been to the Red Lion Inn, you shouldn't admit it here. But we put our second ATM in there, and then we sort of grew towards the middle.
And grew towards the middle. I mean, I suppose that is really coast to coast. Did you like reinvest the cash flow from these ATMs, or you leveraged that like initial funding to?
We had $295,000. We had $295,000. We had $295,000. That's all we had.
Yeah. Okay.
So we built that. We were profitable. We started in September 1997, and I had to get the ATM certified on the networks. I had to have a master electrician get CSA approval. We did all that. We had our first ATMs in October, November, and we were profitable and had about 150 in by the next year. The business plan that we did, we were hoping to build a business that had 250 ATMs or 350 ATMs making $1 million a year.
Yeah.
And we had 500 in the first 2 years.
Wow.
So.
And then once you have 500 in the first 2 years, you start looking at like growth through acquisition, right? You start making big time acquisitions, buying. Well, are you looking at competitors and saying, let's scoop them up and let's add them?
We didn't look at competitors initially. You know, we were in a business that was a land grab at the time. You know, we were the first. We had first mover advantage. Although there was some other competitors that were in the business, Halliburton and White and Frisco Bay were in the business. They weren't active. They were much larger businesses that had they were in the security trust, an income trust, and they're going to pay you 10 times, you know, your earnings to be public.
Yeah.
So, well, that sounds like a good deal. Somebody's going to give me, we're making 80 million, 8 million. They're going to give me 80 million. Said, well, you need to be a bit bigger. So we went out and started buying some of our competitors at that time. Okay. BMO gave us a line of credit. And we used some of the equity in the business, and we started buying competitors. Yeah. And then we went public in 2004, and I continued the buying spree.
Okay.
And over time, I did about 60 acquisitions, about probably 55 here in Canada, 5 internationally. About the largest public company in Australia.
Yeah.
We're $250 million. We bought the largest, the third largest in the UK. And we became the number 2 ATM business in the world.
Okay. And I remember you telling me the story of you're sitting down, you get coffee with someone from H&R Block, and they sit down, they say, hey, look, wait, I'm sorry, actually, before I go there. So I used to work at Skip the Dishes before, similar to like your story. High school, I would go to Skip the Dishes after. But at the time we were starting Skip, it was like 2014. And we were competing against like Chinese restaurants and pizza delivery. Like Uber Eats was not here yet. People did not know what online food delivery was. And so when you're saying first mover advantage, when you're talking about ATMs, to me, that's quite a foreign concept, but like, how were people getting cash before that?
Well, you know, in the old days, like a lot of people would go to the branch, you know, like, for example, my dad would go to the branch on Friday and he would get money for the following week. And then in the early 80s, ATMs were only in bank branches or in outlets. Like one of the reasons I went to RBC and said, when I was at Turbo, Payless, and Shell, and said, put ATMs in. And what they said to me is, well, we'll put them in, but you have to pay for them and you have to subsidize their operations because the ATM is $50,000 at the time. So very few ATMs. In 1997, there was, I think, 12,000 ATMs in the country.
Okay.
There's now 50,000 ATMs in the country.
Yeah.
And what happened is Interac deregulated in 1997. They were deemed by the Competition Bureau as acting as a conspiracy, not allowing small others to profit in ATMs. So they changed the regulation, allowing non-members, which spurned the ATM business, which said, hey, independents can now own ATMs. So that spurned the start of the business. And so hotel operators, of course, wanted ATMs in their facilities. The more money you have available in your facilities, and this is before tap and pay, before cash was so not as necessary. We were putting them in bars, nightclubs, of course, because, you know, you go to a bar, you don't want to hand your credit card over, lose your credit card, you're handing cash all night, or in a bar, in a nightclub, in a hotel. So there was a huge need for cash in all those businesses.
So as you mentioned, it's like a land grab, like hotels, anywhere you can put it. Yeah, let's get an ATM. Cool. And then H&R comes to you. You have coffee with H&R, and they say, look, we want to be able to take out cash and I'll let you kind of finish that story.
I had lunch with a guy named Todd McCallum, who is the VP. And, you know, listen, I was a sales guy. My job was to sell and make money. And I was running the business. But listen, when you're running this was a small business. We had 30 or 40 employees. I was the sales guy. We had others, but I was the sales guy. And if you're running a business, you're a sales guy. If you're not a sales guy, I don't know what you're doing. So I'm having lunch with this H&R Block. I'm thinking, hey, there's 1,500 of these locations he's got. I could maybe put in ATMs. This would be a goddamn good deal for me. But he says, you know, I've got this problem. He says, we have 200,000 people we write cashback tax returns for, and they walk across the street to Money Mart, and Money Mart whacks them 3%. And I just wrote him a check, and all that money's walking across the street. Is there something, you know, I'd sure like to be able to find a way to do it. I went away and thought about it. You know, why don't we just give everybody a debit card? And they can withdraw the money from our ATMs or any ATMs. I went back to H&R Block and said, I could probably do this. And they said, well, if you could do that, we'd buy it. So I went and found a credit union that would let me issue 500,000 cards on my bank account. So like your daughter, and the credit union out of Toronto called All Trans Credit Union. The two guys there said, sure, we'll let you do it. Yeah, sounds good. So I went and built a system that's basically said, if the transaction comes to me, it decrements your balance.
Yeah.
Which became the prepaid card business. This was in 2000. And I went back to H&R Block and I brought in an ATM and I showed them how it works. And they said, well, Jeff, we can't do this. You're awfully small. I went, holy smokes, guys. I just blew the wad building this thing.
Yeah.
And then we sold it to the check cashing and payday loan business, but that's how the prepaid card market started. We started it here in Canada.
Yeah.
And we eventually, H&R Block became our customer, and we issued tax returns or cashback tax returns for them for 20 plus years.
Yeah. Okay. That's amazing. And so first ever prepaid card was in Canada, and that's remarkable. And so then, okay, take me now. So you go public in 2004. And this is, I assume this is like a paradigm shift of leadership, right? There's probably one paradigm shift where it's just you and your partner and you start like building a team and you build a team around you. But another paradigm shift is probably when you go public and you start getting scrutinized. What does that become for you? All of a sudden being the CEO of a publicly traded company?
It's shitfest. Like, so we went public in 2004, and listen, it's a wonderful experience to learn. It's a wonderful experience to learn. But it's learning the hard way. You go on the road show and you have to sell yourself, you have to sell your equity. So you in a small business, you're selling yourself, but you're suddenly in Toronto on Bay Street, you're selling your presentation, you got to learn how to do it in 20 minutes, and you got to learn how to do it 25 times a day, walking 40 feet to the next office. And honestly, it's an interesting skill to have. It's learn your 3-minute sort of elevator pitch, but then there's a lot of scrutiny on your business that wasn't there when you're private. And everybody has an opinion.
Yeah.
Every single one of them has an opinion, and they're all your shareholders, so you have to take all their calls.
Yeah.
And every shareholder call you take is a minute you're not selling.
Right.
So, listen, it was a wonderful experience for me. I certainly became much more familiar with the public markets, much more with the capital stack of businesses. I wouldn't trade that experience for anything, but I caution anybody who wants to do it and accessing that public markets. Do you really need to? What do you need to? What are you trying to do? Because you're going to be giving up a lot to do.
And now we're a little bit jumping ahead, but since we're here, I think there's a trend now in founders looking at companies and understanding, like, can I start this company without taking investment? Or also, can I start companies without going public? And you can especially do that if you don't take investors on, because you just build incredible companies with high dividends and high cash flow where you're just paying yourself. Do you have a take on how you should be building companies nowadays and what the ideal company to run is?
Well, I like private businesses,
Yeah.
but I appreciate that not private businesses, depending on the business, is not always possible. A lot of small businesses and entrepreneurs take on a private equity partner and that type of thing. Listen, that's not something I'm a proponent of. Every time you do that, you have to cut your equity, and you have to bust my balls to get my equity.
Yeah.
Like, it's just not something that I want to give up, because I'm a believer. So I don't want to give a guy 30%, because the way I look at it is every time I have another equity partner at the table, is every time I sell something, I give 30% away. When I sold my ATM business, I was the largest shareholder, but I only owned around 20%.
Okay.
So that meant, in my mind, my little mind, every dollar I brought in, 80 cents went out the door. That's a very large tax to me.
Yeah.
I only got 20 cents. So what I tell founders is, okay, if you need the money, I understand, but every time you sell a piece,
Yeah.
you're paying a tax.
Yeah.
And they're not working.
Yeah. And so
And they got all great ideas, but they don't work,
yeah, they can be advisors, but yeah, they're not there with the sweat equity, actually putting in
they're not selling.
they're not selling. Yeah. And so you mentioned when you sold the ATM business, that's in 2017.
It closed in 2017. I sold 2016.
Okay. And so walk me through that. So you go from being a publicly traded company, you grow through acquisitions, 6 or 7 acquisitions, buy that company in Australia, and then someone comes to you and says, look, hey, we got 600 million and we want to take your company private again and get out of here.
It wasn't so we taken our business, and we talked about it earlier. I was earning $8 million. The new business, after the 70 acquisitions and our growth, was making $100 million.
Yeah.
So we were a $100 million business. Our office was in Northeast Calgary in a little warehouse, 1420 28th Street. And we had an office in Toronto. We had offices in Melbourne. We had offices in London, Cabo San Lucas, Mexico, as well as in Wellington in New Zealand.
Nice.
500 employees. And we looked at our business, and even when we looked at our business before we bought Australia, we looked at our business and our skill set, and our skill set was, listen, we operated our business on a far leaner basis than most of our competitors. Our cost structure was much, much better.
Yeah.
In an acquisition, I got 1 or 2 turns by being able to rationalize their business, AKA fire people. But that's what it means when you say 1 or 2 turns of efficiency. It means fire people because 70% of most businesses is salaries.
Right.
But when we looked at our business and we acquired Australia, we ran that for a few years and we saw that transactions were declining. Tap and pay had just come out. They just put these chips on cards and people were starting to tap. We saw our transactions. When I started the business, they were 1,000 transactions per month on average. We were down to 346 on average, 350. Still a good business. That's $350 a month at $1. It's $500 at $1.50 sort of thing. But it was harder to get a return in the business. And our transactions were less. We looked at it and said, listen, we should probably, and we were a high dividend paying corporation. So we earned $100 million and we paid out $40 million in dividend. So if I had cut my dividend, my share price would have went down to the floor. We thought to ourselves, listen, this business is changing. The fundamentals are changing. We have to be a lot larger. But given my high dividend, I couldn't just invest my capital stack. The shareholder wanted their dividend. There's many Calgary, including myself, I wanted my dividend. Many Calgary people and investors in our business wanted the dividend. But we looked at our business and said, hey, this might be in better hands. So I actually approached our competitors. I quietly put the company up for sale. I hired an advisor. And I put the company up for sale in 2016 and negotiated with a bunch of parties, private equity being one of them. But I wasn't that thrilled with private equity because private equity meant that Jeff had to stay, roll his entire shares. Every other shareholder gets out except Jeff.
Yeah.
And then my 18%, I'm in no different spot.
Right.
80 cents of every dollar goes out the door to the private equity guy.
And you're still running this company that you think is
Well, I think it's better in other hands. So the best bid for us was the largest competitor in the world, Cardtronics, and we sold it to them in 2016. And we're public. It takes a number of time to have your shareholder meeting and all that. And we sold that business in 2017.
Okay, awesome. And I guess to just close the loop, and we'll come back to it, but there's a little part of the company that is not sold, which is a Schedule I bank that Cardtronics did not want. That you decided to, okay, well, now that I'm done with direct cash ATMs, I'm going to take over the Schedule I bank, which is now what you're running now.
Yeah, so when we sold Cardtronics, we were actually, at the time, before we sold Cardtronics, we were actually going to sell the bank into the public company for $15 million. Said, we'll just take shares back and we'll own more of the public company. Cardtronics came to us and said, we don't want anything to do with that bank. And at the time, the bank was only making $1 million. And the reason the bank was only making $1 million is because I was the largest shareholder of the public company, and I didn't want any of my shareholders to think that I was draining their profits out into this other entity that I was the shareholder. So it only made $1 million. It had one employee, the president. I wasn't allowed to be the president of the public company, and the president of the bank, OSFI, the regulator in the bank business, said, no, you have to be a full-time president. So we sold the ATM business. And I was out of a job, so the president of the bank became out of a job, and I took that job.
Yeah, and now that's become TC Bank with about 100 employees here in Calgary. And
yeah, we have about 80 employees, and we have about 45 contractors because we do some international development work. Some of our transaction monitoring is actually offshored, that type of thing. Dev is offshored. So about 150 employees. We're about 130 million in revenue.
Yeah.
A lot bigger business.
Amazing. What do you guys think of that story so far? Pretty good. Maybe a quick clap? Yeah. Jeff, let's have some fun now. Let's talk about your mindset when you're building some of these companies and what it really takes to be an entrepreneur. Is it intelligence at the beginning? Were you the smartest guy at Shell? Is that why you were able to do this and build this ATM company?
If you think you're the smartest guy in the room, you just became the stupidest.
Yeah.
Listen, there's only being an entrepreneur for me was an accident. I took an opportunity, at 25, 27, I took a chance. I felt in my life at that time that I was in a place where, I didn't have a mortgage. My wife had a reasonable job. I could afford to take a 50% pay cut. But listen, to be an entrepreneur takes one thing. Hard work, hard work, hard work, hard work, hard work, more hard work.
Yeah.
Give it a little more hard work, hard work, hard work. And sure, you you can't be an idiot, but you don't have to be the smartest guy in the room. But the one thing you have control of is how much and how hard you're willing to work.
Yeah.
9 times out of 10, I can't tell you how many smart people I've met that aren't willing to work hard. It's hard work. It's hard work.
What do you think of work-life balance in the early days of starting a company?
If you're concerned about work-life balance, don't become an entrepreneur. Like, listen, I can go, like, there's no such thing. You can have balance on a Thursday, but you're not going to get it for 4 more Thursdays. If your expectation is to be home at 5 or start work at 9, don't do this job.
Yeah.
Like, it's 24/7. This thing, some people it's for their own convenience. This is for everybody else's convenience.
Right.
So there's a big difference.
Yeah.
My daughter carries her phone for her convenience. I carry my phone for everybody else's convenience.
Right. They can
So
internet and day.
So it's not any time of the day. It's any time, 24/7, 365.
Yeah.
Because that's when my customers are doing business. And listen, if you want to be successful, work harder than the other guy. You don't have to be smarter. You have to work harder. Because a lot of people will give up. Most people will give up.
Yeah.
And some of the smartest ones will give up early because they don't think they can do it.
And it seems like, I think especially in tech, I think like resiliency and grit and hard work are of utmost importance. Do you ever take on like fast iteration loops as well? Because it seems like you just sort of stumble upon like, oh, ATMs are crushing it. But were there times in your story where you had to pivot a lot, or you looked at something that it wasn't working, you said, okay, fuck this, we're not going to do this anymore, we're going to do something else?
Well, a lot of people say, I hear a lot of people say, like, what's your objective? You know what my objective is? Make more money. That's my objective.
Yeah.
So I don't have an objective to be the nicest guy. I don't have the objective to be the worst guy. I don't have the objective to, my objective is to make more money for my business and shareholders. And when you're the top of the capital stack and you're the president or the CEO or both, your job is shareholder return. And when I was in the public company, I took that job seriously.
Yeah.
My job is to make more money for my shareholder.
Yeah.
In this relationship, I happen to be the shareholder. And work-life balance doesn't enter into it. And fast iterations, we pivoted all the time.
Yeah.
All the time. And did we change our fundamental business? No. We were in the ATM business. Right. But we saw an opportunity to get in the prepaid card space because we had lunch. That was $18 million of my earnings when we were making $100 million. It was very meaningful. It went from 0 to 18 million. We were in the debit terminal business. It was $3 or $4 million of our earnings. We took over, we started processing our own transaction processing. We put our own switch in because we could make more money and we could cut out one of our suppliers.
Yeah.
To become vertically integrated. We did our own service. We had 35 guys in Canada here running around in vans fixing ATMs because it was cheaper than me paying NCR to do it.
Yeah. You in our pre-call, you used the term, and I'm just repeating it because it stands out in my mind, of you can think you're wagging the dog when you're doing something uniquely or intelligently, but the only time you're really wagging the dog as a CEO of a company is when you're making money. Mm-hmm. And there's nothing else to it.
Well, listen, if you're running a business that's not making money, you're beholden to the provider of your capital, regardless of how it works. It doesn't matter what business is, the dry cleaner, the ATM business, the banking business. If you're not making money, you have no safety. Your safety net is the supplier of your capital stack. And the supplier of your capital stack can dictate terms to you. How you negotiate and dictate terms in return is make money and don't need capital.
Yeah.
Right? So many young entrepreneurs get in this, I'm not a big proponent of growing businesses, and there's been some wonderful examples of where guys have done this so successfully, and they're the richest guys in the world today. But, Amazon, he's the richest, he's in the top 5. Yeah. But he built a business from zero that was losing money forever to suddenly making money. Yeah. That's typically not the recipe that works. Right. Find a business, make money and make more money and invest your returns. You'll lose less of your equity and you'll have control of your capital stack.
Yeah.
It's not always possible, but that's the best way to do it.
And I am seeing, I mean, like Lucas in the back is an example, I feel like, of right now watching him start a company sort of so we actually sit across desks from each other in some sort of, in an office space, co-working space. That was probably much nicer than yours back in the day. But watching him just acquire his first customer, I think your company cost you what, like $20 in API calls to build? And then just like reinvesting the money that he's getting from his first customer, paying for a prototype. And I think now
I think it cost his brain power, which is more than $20.
yeah, that's right. But now with the advent of AI, I think a lot of founders can do that more. Of you can build a product with very little capital investment and go find your first customer and even sell it before even building. Right? It's going to take you 2 weeks to build it.
I have sold more things from presentations in PowerPoint
Yeah.
before it's built, because you might you need product market fit. If a customer's not going to pay you for it, why are you building? Doesn't matter how good and sexy you feel about it.
Yeah.
If a customer's not going to pay you for it, it's worth zero.
Yeah.
Every single time. Every single time.
Yeah. Hey, it doesn't matter how much you think it's going to save the world if no one's going to use it. Talk to me now about building your team. So it's you and a partner. In the early stages, how are you thinking about building a team around you and highlighting your strengths and allowing you to do what you do, which sounds like it's selling.
Well, listen, when we were starting, it was survival.
Yeah.
Right. We hired those that sent a resume to us. I suspect it's like that for any small business. People didn't open my door and say, "Hey, Jeff, we'd love to work for you." They certainly didn't happen when they started our business. We're in a very small, 700 square feet down by the Denny's here. I don't think anybody said, "I want to work in that place."
Yeah.
It was, but we hired those that are around us. And over time, you start to realize where your expertise was. I learned that my expertise was in sales. My expertise was in operating a business. My partners was in, trained lawyer. So we had the best contracts, and our business was contracted recurring revenue. So we had the best contracts in the business. They were emulated by all my competitors, and we sort of operated our business that way. And over time, you start to build a team out where you're short, right? And in any business, the key functions to me in my business and any business I've run are, operations. What do you do for contracts? What are you doing for your financials? Who's running your financials? I can't tell you how many small businesses I've seen that, do financials every 3, 4, 5 months. Well, that doesn't work. You need a report card every month. So, those are key functions in our business. And in our banking business, it's, what are we doing in the legal department? All our business is contracted recurring revenue, so I got to have good contracts. What are we doing in a tech support role in our business? Who's running our tech? How's that run? Who's the leader there? Because your teams become who your leaders are.
Right. And do you think about building your team differently from you talked before about thinking about your teams as you use the term high performance sports team versus maybe like a family. I always cringe when I hear founders say, "This is a family. Welcome to the family." This is really not what you're building, right? You want to build a high performance sports team where everyone's playing a role and you can get traded off the team if you're not doing well.
Well, it's not a family.
Yeah.
It's a business. And the reality is, if you're leading that business as the CEO or the president or both, your job is shareholder value. And shareholder value means that you need to have the best assets, and assets aren't necessarily tables. Assets are employees. If 70% of your expenses are employees, those are your assets. And some assets can turn to liabilities. And your job is to move them along, coach them along, and push them along. And you have to do that, and you have to realize where skill sets are. In my history of the last 30 years, I've had people that were fantastic for 4 or 5 years. The business got larger. It got bigger. And some moved along. And your job is to recognize that. And you need to be kind in doing that, but you need to do it.
Yeah.
You need to get the puck in the net. You need to sell to customers. And, my initial sales guys are not my initial sales people today. They're just not the same.
Yeah.
our lawyers are not the same. Our finance people are not the same. It's much more complex. It's the bigger you are, and this stuff happens. If you're not going to be, if you're not ready to deal with it, you're not going to be successful.
Yeah. Okay. Now talk to me about DC Bank. So now you're running this, and maybe just what's DC Bank all about? What are you guys hoping to grow? You have the 3 verticals. One sort of a banking as a service API. Talk to me about what's going on at DC Bank.
So if you think about, listen, we have a Schedule 1 bank. It's the same charter as RBC, TD, the National Bank. But our business is about payments. And we have a centerpiece to that payments business, which is a Schedule 1 bank. So we were lucky enough to incorporate a bank in 2007 and get our operating license in 2008, just before the global financial crisis. And that's really been a competitive piece of our opportunity, because we don't have to talk to anybody else if we want to enter a business. We are the bank. And this was one of the frustrating things I had when I dealt with that credit union. I have to go talk to these 2 guys in Toronto, and I was making $20 million out of my prepaid card space, and the credit union was making 3. And they were telling me what I couldn't do. Yeah. And I'm like, this doesn't work for me. So that's why we incorporated a bank. But our centerpiece is that bank in payments. We do no lending. All we do is move money. And if you think about our verticals, we move money where there's margins. And we move money in the prepaid card space. Those that want to issue prepaid cards, like the Liberty Tax, the H&R Blocks, any sort of prepaid card that wants a payment vehicle. We've also expanded. Our biggest success to date has been Interact e-Transfer, where people want the immediacy of paying someone or receiving cash. And we've taken that technology, and listen, Interact's got a great product, but we've built a technology stack and platform on top of that makes it easy for our customers to connect, and provided banking as a service to integrate that to many customers. And really what we're doing is taking a product, adding our products and services to it, the technology stack and processing engine, and building it out. Most of our competitors, don't have their own processing stack. We're an active network infrastructure that makes it available for customers to integrate to us simply.
Yeah. So, since I announced that we were hosting you and you were going to come on stage, I've been hearing a lot of very funny stories about you. People have pulled me aside and been like, "You got to hear this story about Jeff. He's like jumping off boats, wrestling marlins, and doing some deep sea fishing." But then someone also sent me a photo of you guys have a security guard at your office, who's very rude apparently. What's up with the security guard that you guys got?
Well, I was in London a few years. Well, it's 10 years ago now. I was in London on Bond Street. We had an office in London, and I would oftentimes, if you're there a Saturday, walk up and down Bond Street. It's a good shopping district, whatever, something to do, have coffee. And I walked into his art gallery, and there's a painting I liked on the wall, and there's a security guard right there. And I started, "Could you get me a salesperson, please?" The person was so rude, didn't even say anything to me. And then I realized that the person was a statue. So I thought to myself, I have to have this. I ordered it, and it got shipped to our, we sold our business, and I had it shipped to Calgary, and it was in a crate, and the shipper opened the crate and almost passed out, thought it was a dead body in a police uniform, and we put it at our front door as sort of a gag gift, or not a gag gift, but a gag thing. And we've had many, many people screaming at the front door, couriers demanding that she opens the door.
Yeah, because she's just standing there and she's not real.
Not real at all. It's very real.
She looks I got a photo. If anyone wants to come see this photo after, let me know. It looks so real. It's insane. But yeah, I'll close it up before we open to audience Q&A. Money. How do you make more money at DC Bank? What's the growth goal, and what is next for you guys as you look at...
Our objective is to earn more money, greater return for our shareholders, but we're in the payments business. So finding ways and niches. Listen, the Canadian banking environment is really good. Like the Royal Bank's excellent. Yeah, CIBC is excellent. TD is excellent. ATB is excellent. They've got the consumer-facing business tied up. Where our space is really working is B2B, customers and businesses that are having a hard time getting, explaining their business to, these large businesses. A consumer has lots of options with RBC, TD. A business, not so much. And it's hard to find somebody to make a decision in the bank. So where we look at our ability to execute is with, in a B2B space, understanding our customers' business, what they need, and building a technology for them. And building technology for our customers is a great way to understand their business and build their success with ours. So that's what we've been doing. And that's worked for us.
Yeah, that's interesting. Okay, cool. Well, I suppose now, like, curious your take on, after saying that, of okay, the big banks actually on a consumer front do a really good job in Canada. I'm curious what your take is on some of these like emerging fintechs and Wealthsimple and Coho as an example of how will these players be able to compete in where they're competing over like the big banks have 93% market share in the consumer space.
It's really tough.
Yeah.
Like, the big banks can compete in the space, and the challengers need a bank to compete.
Right.
So Coho can't offer any service without going through a bank. That sounds to me like a problem.
Yeah. Not a problem for you guys though, Schedule 1. That's beautiful.
No, but I also think any business that goes after the consumer is a higher cost to acquire that transaction. Your CAC is really high.
Yeah.
And your churn is really high. Like, listen, it's hard. It's hard. There is retail businesses that are attractive, but when you're paying $250, $300 for a cost of a customer, and that revenue stream looks like $6, I don't know, but it doesn't sound good. My CAC is $2,000 and my customers make $3,000 a month.
Yeah.
So I like that business better.
Yeah. Awesome.
Not months. So Wealthsimple, I think he's got an interesting play there, and he's just started making money, but the millennials have no money. They don't have. Sorry.
All these little millennials.
Well, what's your stock? When you want to make money in the stock business, you need a guy that has $500,000.
Yeah.
Like 1% of of $20,000 is not a lot of money. 0.5% is even less. That's why the big banks are buying the other brokerages. It's a tough business.
Yeah.
And when fee is your only option, when fee is your only button, it's tough.
Yeah.
If you have to discount your fee, it's the same as putting a razor blade in your neck.
Right.
Cutting your own throat. Sorry.
No, that's great. It's kind of a somber mood to end it off on, but maybe a round of applause for Jeff. Yeah, thank you. All right. Let's see how many questions we can get to. Yeah, we got one question in the back, but raise your hand. Yeah, all right.
Thank you. It's actually two questions, if I may. One's in the past, one's in the future. In the past, what do you do different to prevent yourself from effectively becoming an employee of your own company? The second question is, what is the future of gaming? Because I don't really know the last time I used cash. And using cashless payments, there's also, we never even talked about crypto. So can you touch on that?
What would I do differently? Well, I probably, I would have went public, but there was a few acquisitions where I think I got scared and I didn't buy. One in particularly was before we went public, when I could have bought Frisco Bay. It was $32 million, and I got scared because it was too big at the time. So probably I would not be afraid of my fear that I had back then about my skills. Like, I was capable, but I was afraid. That would be my biggest. And how not to become an employee. Listen, it's a tough game when you're building a business and you need capital. I would have probably tried to take on more debt and had more conviction in my skills to build the cash flow, right? I did, and I think every one of you that's starting a business has those same things. Be confident in your skill set. Be confident, right? Don't be afraid. And debt is ugly because they can own you, but equity owns you faster. Don't be afraid.
Future payments, any take on that?
Well, cash isn't gone. Listen, cash isn't gone. when I started the ATM business, cash was 32% of the spending profile. It's now 12 to 18, depending on which study you're looking at. It's not disappeared. And it won't be gone, but it's a lot less. Listen, tap and pay is here to stay. Like, I used to have a wad of cash. Of course, I was in the ATM business, and cash was my business, but I don't pay cash at Tim Hortons anymore. I tap. Same at Starbucks. I think it is disappearing. But listen, I think what's happening in payments is the immediacy of money is going to move at a much higher rate. There's still a lot of locked up money in EFTs, e-transfers, SWIFT. There's a whole big amount of money. I think with the what Bank of Canada is trying to do with moving money, that's going to speed up the speed of cash. But that's where I see is good opportunity. The open to buy is going to be available. Interact e-transfer has grown from, well, even our own stats. We did 97 million transactions in the first 6 months of the year. A year ago, we did 30 million. So it's a three-bagger, right? We're seeing that eat into EFTs. You're paying it with rent. You're paying all kinds of things with that immediacy of money. So you'll see more in the immediacy of money. Crypto, I was in the crypto business space. I own Bitvo. Pam, in fact, who now runs our payments business, is the president of the payments business. I think crypto is here to stay. I don't think that Bitcoin's here to stay. Sorry. I think that doesn't mean Bitcoin's not going to be $100,000. That doesn't mean it's not going to be $200,000. I'm not giving you that, but I think, listen, as soon as a sovereign issues a digital token, they'll disappear. And there's going to be a sovereign issue because the biggest number one moving item in the crypto space is what? A stablecoin. What's a stablecoin? Stablecoin is, now it's interesting, a stablecoin is pegged to a currency, not backed. And as soon as a sovereign backs a stablecoin, those stablecoins that are pegged are going to be worthless. My take, could be wrong. I was wrong. I sold my crypto at 20,000.
Anyone else like here before we go back? Fine. We go up here.
Judd, what struck me as you sped through your impressive milestones is that you seem not afraid of scaling, or maybe you were, but went for it anyway. My question is, how did you scale so fast while managing the overall increase in responsibilities?
Well, it may seem fast, but that's just because I'm here. When I talked about it. But I started with one desk and one phone in September 1997, and I sold in September 2016, 19 years almost to the later. And the scale took 20 years, and I was at my desk 20 years. So I was at the same business, the same company for 20 years. So it took a long time. To be fair, it sounds fast, and we did it one at a time, one employee at a time, one business deal at a time. My success was, me knocking on cooler doors and then trying to replicate myself. What I tell entrepreneurs is, if you want to be successful, you need to replicate yourself. Replicate. You need to train. You need to teach. You need to find people that can do what you do. You need to find people that can do it better. Like, I used to be the accountant. I can tell you that I have a much better accountant today. I used to be the salesperson. We have much better salespeople today. I used to be the operator. Pam's now an operator. Amanda, who's maybe here, operates our bank. They're much better than I am, right? You need to replicate yourself. You need to recognize where you are not as strong, where they're as strong. And you need to learn, and this is a very hard lesson as an entrepreneur, how to release. And I'm sure my people who are here will tell you that I don't like to release things. But you need to learn.
Yeah, we always just say, fire yourself. Learn how to fire yourself.
Yeah, I don't like firing myself. But, you need to trust in their decisions, and you need to be willing to correct them.
Thank you for your speech in your journey. I have one question. You mentioned vertical integration. Are there any drawbacks that you find for vertical or horizontal integration in your career? That's one question. The second, how do you keep yourself motivated?
The second one's easy, dividends. Well, so your first question is there been any throwbacks?
Drawbacks
Like
or cons or
To build a whole integration.
to
integrating with or broadening your scope?
anything that's been bad, you're asking me? Lots. So, when we started, I'll give you an example. So, when I sold the ATM business, the bank was making $1 million. And I sold the business, but the business I sold owned the software. Okay? They just paid me $600 million and they weren't going to give me my software to run my bank. They gave it to me for a year, but I needed to replace that software. But the bank was only making $1 million. And the software to replace it was, if you bought it from one of the big shops, was probably 15 or 20 million bucks. We didn't have 15 or 20 million bucks, and I didn't feel like writing a check in for 15 or 20 million bucks. So I went and searched for a very small company that could build us the software for $2 million. Well, I can tell you that had a lot of heartaches because it came with a company that sold me software for $2 million. It had all kinds of problems. It has all kinds of bugs. And I wouldn't do it any differently because I got it for $2 million. But, listen, we had outages and we had temporary problems and integration issues. And I used a company that was in Europe that spoke a different language. So I had to fly to Europe, but I had to get the technology for a price. It's the only way we could grow cost effectively. But so many lessons in how we did it. I would still do it the same, and I'm much happier that he did it because I didn't spend 15 million, but I probably spent 10 over time. So there's all kinds of ways to do it. You have to find ways, and it's not always buying the biggest and best software.
Last GB. Great insights, Jeff. Thank you so much. Just one thing I'd like you to clarify. The last thing you said before we started the Q&A, when we were talking about the Wealthsimple business model, he said if the fee is the only thing or the one thing that gets you revenue, it won't cut it. But you started with a fee, your first ATMs.
I started with 2 different fees. I started with 3 or 4 different fees. What I meant to say was, if you have to discount and only make one fee, you're in a very tough spot. In the ATM space, I charged a fee to the customer that I earned, I charged a fee to the location, and I got interchange. You need more than one revenue line. You need multiple revenue lines.
Even if all of them were fees.
Even if all of them were fees to different parties. Like, one revenue line makes it very difficult. One revenue line's only one lever.
Sweet. Okay. Well, Jeff, that was so much fun. Thank you so much for coming. Guys, round of applause for Jeff. How was that? That was great. That was awesome. Cool, guys. Feel free to stick around. Feel free to grab a drink. We got Angela behind the bar, and she's going to help you guys out. So thank you guys so much for coming. Appreciate it.